Hey there, miniature painters. Today we're going to take a look at 3 different ways to add object source lighting to a fully painted and finished miniature. I'm going to demonstrate and compare the use of an airbrush against a standard brush versus a Rattle Can spray paint for establishing the base of this OSL effect. And let me tell you, I have never, ever used a Rattle Can spray paint on a fully painted miniature before. So the pucker factor on that one is pretty high. At the very least, you're going to want to check out that method to see how things turn out. Welcome to Treehane Miniatures. Normally when adding OSL to a miniature that is completely painted, I rely on the airbrush for its speed and accuracy. But as we'll see, there is more than one way to skin a cat. What kind of a sick bastard skins a cat? Anyway, the airbrush is a great place to start for this demonstration, as I have just finished painting Elkthorn for the Dragon Eclipse board game, and I want to add a blue backlight glow to the shaded side of the miniature. Leviathan Blue Contrast Paint is my go-to dark blue paint for establishing this dark blue base layer when using an airbrush. I love the way the contrast paints flow through the airbrush without clogging it up, and even though contrast paints are typically pretty darn translucent, this color does a great job creating the blue shadows around what will eventually be a brighter blue OSL. I always begin by adding 2 drops of flow improver to my airbrush cup, followed by the paint. Then I add thinner in an equal amount to the paint. I give it a mix and start painting. The thing that I like about an airbrush is that it is the perfect mix of speed and precision. All I have to do is aim the nozzle from the direction from where the light source is emanating and give it a squirt. The low pressure of the air compressor coupled with the light volume of the paint flow means that I can build up the intensity of the blue color fairly quickly without having to worry about overspray destroying all of the hard work that I have already put into the piece. By applying the paint through an airbrush from the direction of the light source, all of the areas that would be affected by the light are automatically highlighted with this spray without any thought on my part, and the intensity of the color naturally diminishes over the curved features of the model. As is common for all 3 of these methods of painting OSL, once the base layer is established, I switch to a standard brush for the refined OSL work. For this bright blue OSL, I'm using Electric Blue by Vallejo. I thin this paint to a layer consistency and apply it with short strokes that run perpendicular to the feature that I'm painting. This will help sell the illusion that the blue paint is actually light that is shimmering on the surface of this creature. On the other hand, if I were to paint a line of paint running along the length of a leg for instance, it may appear as though this guy simply has a blue stripe running down his leg, instead of it reading as reflected light. I make sure to highlight all the way to the bottom of each muscle instead of the top, since the blue is acting as a bounce light coming from below this miniature. The final step for this blue OSL is to add some matte white to the electric blue so that we can intensify the blue reflections a little. I have this thinned a little more with water than the previous layer because I want to build up the brighter reflection in a couple of steps. I focus these lighter layers of paint on the lower features of the model that would be facing the light source. These highlights are small, intense reflections that will add focus without obscuring most of the electric blue that we placed in the previous step. I want most of this bounce light on the model to be electric blue. The finished OSL on this model is quite satisfying, and the only thing we can do to make it look even more spectacular is to film it against a black background. Yep, this is cheating. With the dreaded airbrush method out of the way, we can move on to our beloved can do no wrong standard paintbrush. The standard paintbrush is easily the most precise way to establish the foundation for this OSL effect. However, that precision comes at a cost. First, it takes a little longer to paint this way. However, that extra time has never been a significant deterrent for me, as I've painted with this method many times before. Most recently, I used it in a direct comparison against the airbrush in my Fire OSL video. The bigger hurdle to get over is the attention to detail that is required to manually place these foundational highlights. I inspect the model from the angle that I want the light to come from, staring right into the eye of the storm. I note the areas where I think the light would land on the model. Then I use a thinned dark acrylic ink for the base layer. In this case, I'm using crimson acrylic ink, with most of the ink wicked off of my brush. The translucent nature of this ink allows me to build up the intensity of the red in a couple of layers. I begin each stroke at a point on the muscle that is furthest from the light source and draw the stroke towards the light source, stopping at a point near the bottom of the muscle where I want the light to be the most intense. Since less paint is deposited at the beginning of the stroke than at the end of the stroke, this approach will naturally create a smooth drop-off effect as the red layer gets further from the light source. The red ink is translucent, but it is also intense, so this base layer is completed with just a couple of layers. I continue to build this glow with the next paint color. I prefer to use more translucent colors for OSL effects like this clear orange, because less thinning is required, which gives me more control over the paint flow. I keep drawing my strokes toward the light source, covering less area with each subsequent layer. Finally, I add my brightest color, which in this case is pale yellow. Regardless of which method I use to establish the base layer for the backlight effect, I always continue by using a standard brush for intensifying that glow. So working with a standard brush from the outset, as I've done with this model here, may make the most sense from a purely workflow standpoint. And the model doesn't look half bad when all finished. Alright, this is where things get real. I'm taking a fully painted miniature and hitting it with a blast of spray paint from a Rattle Can. The miniature I'm using for this is from the Massive Darkness board game that I previously used to demonstrate layering skin tones. However, at the time, I completely overlooked the fact that every other miniature from this game has a blue backlight glow to it. So today I'm going to remedy that with a dark blue spray paint. Now, I have never done this before on a fully painted miniature. This is the first attempt ever, so the pucker factor here is real. And lest you think I'm being dramatic, check out my Moonbeast video, where I completely obliterate one of the Moonbeast miniatures with an irredeemable amount of red spray paint. And that was during the model preparation phase, which is an easy fix. If that happens here, it's game over, and I'm repainting this guy from square one. So I grab my favorite can of Midnight Blue spray paint. I position the model horizontally so that I can spray it from below at an upward angle, and I begin spraying. Oh shit, that was easy. I don't know what you're getting all worked up about. And this guy's looking pretty good too. The color is nice and dark from below. There's a decent drop off of intensity as the blue reaches the top portion of the muscles. There's a little speckling near the outer edges of the spray, most noticeably on the axe blade, but I can totally work with this. I'm going to stick with my usual cheating Rattle Can OSL technique for this barbarian. This means that I will use a single layer of just one color for the OSL Moonlight Glow. The color that I like to pair with the Midnight Blue spray paint is Azure by Vallejo. I make sure to highlight down to the bottom of each feature on the model since I want it to appear that the light is coming from below. Normally I paint this particular color scheme from above as a moonlight glow, but there's no way I was going to hit a fully painted model with spray paint from above. At least not on my first time trying this. But this has definitely given me the confidence to give it a shot if this situation ever comes up again. I'm actually going to go one step brighter with the reflection on the axe blade, just to differentiate the finish from the rest of the model. I'm scratching some glacier blue into the center of some of the highlights as well as most of the edges. This looks pretty darn good for a quick approach to OSL. Of course, it looks even better when filmed against a black background. Of the three approaches to OSL, I feel that the airbrush method produces the best quality of finish for the time invested. This level of finish can be matched with a standard brush, but it will require a little more time commitment. The Rattle Can method is the fastest method if you want to cheat your way to a fine OSL finish, but it's not capable of producing the same quality of results as the other two methods on models this small. If you'd like to see more ways to paint OSL, click on this video here. Or if you'd like to check out whatever the YouTube algorithm is serving up to you, watch this video here. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters.